Welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast with Stuart Fensterheim, LCSW, your source for the latest tips and practical down-to-earth advice on creating emotionally connected, thriving relationships. Now, here's Stuart.
Hi there, and welcome to the Couples Expert Relationship Podcast. I am so excited that you've joined me today, and I'm really excited to just do another episode. This is episode number 13, and this is April the 29th here in Scottsdale, Arizona. Before I talk about the topic of today, which is a topic of affairs and infidelity, I thought I'd sort of talk a little bit about the thoughts I had about my podcasts. I began these podcasts because I just thought it'd be a lot of fun. And they really have been. They've been really a blast. I record and I write my own podcasts. And they started out with just having a good time. But what I have found that they've come to take on some meaning for me. Because what I've begun to see is that they can really make a difference and have been changing the relationships of my listeners. I've been getting some input from some couples who have been listening to my podcast, and before that really was giving up on their relationships and now are really finding a reason to listen and to really believe that things can be different for them. And that is just so very exciting for me because, after all, that's why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I really want my podcast to be really meaningful to all of you. I want it to be a true resource that you feel helps you feel that love and closeness that all of us really want. And if I can do that, if I really can make a difference in that way, I know what I'm doing is worthwhile. And I really do believe that it can make a difference. So what I'm hoping you'll do for me is go to my podcast show notes for this episode, episode number 13, and there's going to be a link there for a survey. I've got a 4-question survey I'd like you to answer, which just gives me your input on what you like about my podcast, what you wish I was talking about, just really to try to make it more important and meaningful to you. Because what I'd like the subjects to be is about the things that matter to you. And any suggestions that you can give me about the podcast would absolutely be appreciated, because what I want is for you to really look forward. I want you to look forward to hearing my podcasts and really believing that it's something that can really impact you. I want to know how it could be helpful and even more helpful than it already has been. The other thing I'm going to do is put a link in there for something called SpeakPipe. SpeakPipe is the ability to really send me a voicemail. So if you'd rather do that, that would be acceptable. The other thing that I've been thinking about is something not so positive, which is some of the things that have been going on in Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore was a city that I lived for many years, and it's really sad to see everything that's happening out there. But where it relates to me and my podcast is I really do believe that if we can change the nature of the relationships in the family to where they really have people feeling close and connected, some of the craziness that goes on out there, the violence, the gang, the substance abuse, all those things could really be managed in such a better way because people won't need that to find a way to connect. So if we can change what's happening out there in Baltimore and really have a true commitment to having relationships in your family and in my family, in our children's family, I'm hoping will make a difference. But some of the things that get in the way of that is our topic for today, which is people making some bad choices and really having some violations of the trust in their marriage. And so that's what I'd like to talk about today. The topic, obviously, is on infidelity. So let's get started on our podcast. The topic for today, which is on maintaining a connection with your partner and coping with one of the worst relationship injuries any relationship or marriage can have. An affair can destroy any relationship in nothing flat. Nothing's more devastating to a marriage or a relationship when there's a violation of trust. You see, I don't see any more pain in any other issue more than with an affair or the infidelities. But we need to look at that there are many different kinds of trust violation. But the biggest injury that we see, most marriage counselors see in the office, has to do with the most devastating consequences is when there's infidelity of any kind. The impact of infidelity can last for years, and many relationships can't even survive it. Nothing makes a relationship more vulnerable to divorce than having an affair. And the statistics on this are really astounding if you ask anyone. What this podcast today is going to do is hopefully to be very realistic about this issue, but I want to sort of have a little bit of a warning. If you're listening to this podcast and there's any children around, I would please have them go to another room. This podcast is definitely going to be an R-rated podcast, in terms of the movies. So I don't recommend listening to this podcast around your kids, because some of what we're going to talk about is going to be pretty real and graphic about infidelity. Now, one of the things that is the most sort of disturbing to me is that people have a way of twisting facts and reality when they're involved in something that may not be necessarily appropriate. And they tend to twist the reality, not only lying to others, but in their own heads. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I had a woman come in the other day who told me that she didn't feel like she really violated her vows because the only type of sexual contact that she was having with someone at work was anal sex. And that by just doing anal and not doing anything vaginally, she's not violating the commitment that she has to her partner. Now, is there anything more crazy and bizarre than that? I've heard that before. The other I've heard before is oral sex, that if you're doing something orally, that it doesn't change the vows, that you're still sort of keeping your body to your partner. And it's just that kind of twisted logic that just causes such pain for families. It's just not even worth really discussing a whole lot, other than saying what we all need to do when we do something that inappropriately and violating sort of the ethics and morals that we all have is that unless we twist the facts in our head, then we can't even look ourselves in the mirror, so we do that. The problem with sexual indiscretion is that it has us changing our own perception and beliefs to make this action acceptable. There are many excuses, but there's an old saying when it comes to things like excuses. Any excuse is good enough excuse. What I like, though, is that there's a quote that I saw, that success occurs when your dreams are bigger than your excuses. And what we don't want is we don't want our relationship to be filled with excuses. What I also want to let you guys know, sort of as an aside here, is that one of the things I'm going to start doing with my podcasts is I want to start writing blogs along with the podcasts. So, for instance, this one is on marital infidelity. So what my blogs for the next week will be supplementing that information. Like, one of the things that I want to make sure that you guys hear is this is a statistic that really is sort of interesting, is that the polls, when they poll people, and they married people, 90% of married people disapprove of extramarital affairs. But the reality is 25% of men and 15% of women have had an affair. So the two statistics don't really jive. You know, everyone talks about the sexual affair, but sexual affair is not the only kind of affair. There are many, many different kinds of affairs. And what I'm going to try to do with my podcast here over the next few weeks is I want to have 5 podcasts, each one covering a different area. This podcast obviously is covering the sexual affairs, and this is the most common type of affair. But let's sort of define all of this. A sexual affair is when one person is in a relationship, and because of their physical needs, they fulfill their physical needs with someone outside their relationship. It is strictly, for most people, not all people, but for most people, it's a sexual experience. This could include going to prostitutes, one-night stands, going to a bar, strip clubs. You know, 60% of husbands, 40% of wives, what we know, will have an affair at some point in their relationship. The next kind is an emotional affair. These relationships have all the emotional, physical, and social signs of what come with a regular relationship. These would be an emotional affair, which we've heard a lot about lately. For some folks, it can even go to the extent of it's really a second life. And that's sort of, you hear these stories of people who sort of have a family somewhere else and are living basically a regular life just somewhere else with this family. That's the emotional affair, the one that there's a courting and a real emotional investment. Then we have financial affairs. This is a new topic that I've been spending a lot of time sort of studying and thinking about, and actually started to do some writing on, and I plan to do more. This is a really devastating type of deception, and in some ways can be even more disturbing than some of the other affairs, because it really is about lying in the nth degree, having to do with someone's financial well-being. There's deception and lying that goes about spending money, credit card debt, money spent on things. I have a client right now that I'm working with, and basically the deception that's going on with them is really interesting, because basically he has established a friendship with a friend of his that he has given $500 to, and the money is pulled out of the ATM as cash because his partner sometimes looks at it, their account, and he gave this money to someone to help him sort of get a new start. But it is clearly a deception, and it's wrong, and it's really could have a tragic impact on this relationship. And his partner is not aware of that, doesn't know about it. The woman thinks that money just sort of, he overspent somewhere, but doesn't know that he actually gave this to his buddy who he plays tennis with. So deception is wrong, and it's tragic. Then the other kind of affairs that we have, and we've started to hear a lot about these, are the online affairs. These are affairs that people generally are establishing when they're in chat rooms, or it's an email relationship. Now, these at times can have sexual components to it, because more and more with webcams and that type of technology, with Skype and just all the different kinds of technological advancements we have, people are having these online affairs take very sexual parts of it, where people are basically getting nude online, and there's masturbating that people are doing, and people are just doing a lot of things, sending nude photos. I actually had an interesting thing came across my desk, which was the amount of people, when they instant message someone, instant message the wrong person, is such an astronomically high percentage. And now with these things where nude photos are being sent to people's boss accidentally, and people losing their jobs. So these online affairs really are sort of a new trend. Then what we also have is something called an object affair. These object affairs are when your partner's or your husband or wife's attention is drawn outside the relationship, not to another person, but to an activity or to something. It could be even something very, very positive. It could be, working on computers or video games, or watching sports, but even someone working out, if they work out to a point that it is totally leaving their partner out of that experience, and their focus is primarily drawn there and away from the relationship, it really needs to be looked at as an affair. What we're going to do is take each one of these areas, and I'm going to pull it apart and really look at ways of dealing with it and coping with it. But, today's podcast is going to be more on the sexual relationship. Now, let me be clear about something. If you haven't already guessed, I have a very strong opinion on this. Infidelity is destroying marriages. And we need to find a way that becomes not something that most families deal with. But if you are dealing with it, let's make something positive out of it. So I don't want anyone to feel that I'm placing judgment, but that we really need to take a look at how are we going to deal with these sexual indiscretions that are coming up in our marriages and our relationships. And that's really what this podcast is really all about. You're never really immune to an affair. Infidelity is a painful issue to write about, and it's incredibly pulverizing to live through it. It's a heartbreak beyond heartbreak. It's really the ultimate betrayal, and whether it's survivable or not is really up for grabs. But the hardest advice that I give folks that sometimes they're willing to do and they're not is you need to talk to your partner about it. You need to openly communicate and voice your concerns about your relationship before you absolutely act on this affair. Because I think really I think having an affair really is a choice. Some people would disagree with me on that, but I really do think it is a choice. And there are incredible amount of signs that begin to happen for someone when they begin to start considering this. So what you need to do is, during those times when you begin to sort of play around with that idea, that's when you have to start talking about it with your partner. We need relationships that are secure enough that you can absolutely bring anything up, including this issue. Infidelity is considered by some the absolute ultimate sin that someone can commit on their partner. But in couples counseling, long-term committed relationships can not only handle this, but you can avoid it by talking about the things that really matter to you. The problem with all of this is there's no hard, fast rules of exactly what do you do. The thing that we have to just remember and a thing I want you to remember is that there have been many people who have gone through this and have come out from the other side. It is traumatic. There's no way avoiding that. But what I believe, and what I think we now know with some of what we know about relationships, is that we can absolutely get people from the brink of disaster, from having an affair, relationship injuries, to get them to a place where there's healing and that the relationship does now have a feeling of security and stability. What infidelity does is it wounds that ability to trust. And what it does for a lot of folks is it brings up lots of different problems and different kinds of issues from a mental health standpoint. People begin to have things that are very similar to post-traumatic stress disorder because their marriage is now falling apart. Anxiety disorders run rampant in this area, and you need to deal with all of those. So what we have to do is the first place is to really begin to talk about how do we have some semblance of trust in this relationship. And we need to have the two of you begin to feel safe enough to begin to talk about some of this. And that really begins with an understanding of what just took place. What, as a counselor, my role with the two of you will be to help you have a new experience that then has you seeing each other in a different kind of way. So that in the counseling, that's a lot of what takes place, is that the emotions are going to be running wild and rampant, from anger to sadness to fear to rage even. And the person that basically is going through dealing with the discovery that there now has been an affair in the marriage is really going to feel like they're going insane. And it really is a feeling of being crazy. So there are stages to what we, in our understanding about affairs, there are really stages of the recovery. And that's really a lot of what I'm going to be talking about. The first stage is the discovery of the affair. And in that discovery phase, there is a tremendous amount of anger that you're going to be going through. And the anger is going to take you to emotions that you've never, ever, ever knew that you had. And these rageful feelings are going to come up from out of your soul even. And what's going to happen with all of this is you begin to question everything about the relationship. The problem really is that at this stage in the discovery period, there isn't even an ability to really get the questions answered, because there is no ability to even process a lot of what's going on. The awareness that your relationship is in this kind of trouble needs to be accepted. And what you have to start doing is riding the shockwaves of the emotions. But my hope would be that what you could also do is to begin to talk about and think about having a different kind of relationship, one that has that trust in there, and begin to really picture in your head your future in this relationship. Now, the first step, obviously, in the discovery phase is going to be deciding if you want to maintain this relationship. You're going to feel that abandonment. It's going to be pretty darn strong. And it's likely going to be to a point where you're going to see it as almost that there is no way that this relationship will survive this. That intense negativity is going to come up. Now, what I want to urge you not to do is not to turn to your partner at this point. At the point of the discovery of the affair, your partner is not going to be able to really help you in a lot of ways. They can be there, they can listen to you, and I'm going to be talking a lot about what your partner needs to do during this phase. But be careful that you're not looking to your partner to really be supportive at this point, because they can't do it. They're running and covering and trying to figure out what they're doing at the same time. So by trying to talk to your spouse about what happened, about your feelings about this, is going to intensify your negative feelings, because what you're going to feel and sense, and truthfully it's going to be accurate, is that they're not there for you, because they're still mentally processing what's happened. And the key here, though, is that both of you need to listen to one another, even if it really, really hurts. You both need to start talking about what has been missing in the relationship. We need to get out of the denial that for a lot of couples is really strong, which is everything was okay, is what I hear. Everything was wonderful. And I even sometimes hear this from the partner who had the affair, that it wasn't about the relationship. Well, sure. I don't believe it for a second, neither should you. The reality is that there were some absolute problems in this relationship that has led to someone being willing to take that kind of risks. Now, where your partner is at during this phase is that he needs or she needs to sever the ties with the partner completely. Now, that's not always so easy, particularly if the relationship was at work. But the commitment has to be that there is no contact outside of work if it's a work relationship, but no contact with the previous relationship at all. If it happens to be a relationship that the two of you were friends, or the reality is probably in order to really survive this, you're probably going to have to break off that relationship. This is the phase for the person who had the affair to live to the nth degree, that the partner should ask the questions and the one that had the affair have to tell it all. But be careful what you're asking for, because the problem is, if you ask for something that is unnecessary for you to get through it, you're probably not going to ever forget any of this. And what I see happening for a lot of women especially is they ask about some of the sexual activities, and those images just get really strong into the head, and you're going about your day and it pops up and you can't let it go. So don't ask any question that you don't think you need the answer to in order to move forward. Okay? The other thing is, I think that you need to take a break from talking about this, that there need to be some set, clear rules of how often the discussion happens and for how long. Don't go hours and hours and hours talking about this stuff, okay? What the goal here is, more than anything in this phase, is to get through the initial discovery, to make a decision of whether or not you want to continue in the relationship, and deal with finding this out, okay? Once that, and you want to set some realistic goals. And what you're going to find happening is there are going to be a lot of triggers that are going to go on. The question that a lot of times I get asked is, so what do we do here? I've made a decision to stay, but it feels so bad. The two of you need to begin to do some courting. And it needs to be things like date nights, privacy. Triggers are going to come up. But set realistic goals for yourself. This is going to take a very long time to get through this one phase. And you need to begin to work toward feeling okay just being together. And once you really get to a place where you can make a decision whether you want to be in this relationship, and once you make that decision, living that decision. And what that means is you need to be able to not only say, yes, I want to be together, but once you do that, accepting that there are going to be periods that you're not going to know whether your partner is being honest with you, and you're going to have to accept it, that you can't get a private eye and follow him or follow her around. That if you decide to stay, the risks that come along with that is the risk of not knowing at this point whether or not they're truly committed. Stage 2, which is really about, now that we've discovered this affair, we've agreed that we're going to work together on trying to put together the pieces. Now we have to talk about how we're going to resolve the problems so that both people can work together to salvage your relationship. Because unless both of you are doing this together, focusing on the infidelity issues, you have to be doing this together. And this is really where we need some really clear rules about how much time do you spend on the affair talk. This is also the time where you have to begin to talk about and have your partner really being present for you to talk about how the affair impacted you. Okay? I absolutely don't agree. And I see this happening time and time again for counselors who set it up this way that I think backfires, which is they do individual counseling with the partner. This is a phase when you begin to work on this that there is no trust. There is very little confidence in any of this. So all the work in the counseling, in my opinion, has to be joint sessions. There are no secrets with the counselor. Confidentiality is not applied here. That if you have a communication with one as a counselor, the other person needs to know about it. Okay? That's the rule you go into this. There are going to be plenty of counselors that do not work this way, that they'll want to set you up for individual sessions and do it confidentially. As a couple, I urge you to talk with whoever you see if you participate in couples counseling, and let them know that you've decided not to have confidentiality and that you want all communication and everything open for discussion. Because unless that safety net is there for the two of you, where there is complete openness and vulnerability and confidence that you have all information, it will backfire on you. So I really encourage you to take control of some of those sessions and let the counselor know that that's how you would like them to run. The only thing that will salvage this relationship is total honesty and openness so that there are no secrets. Why I believe this is helpful is because what it allows you to sort of begin to do is talk about the things that the partner found missing in the relationship that had the marriage being vulnerable to this affair. This really is a time that you need to answer all questions that might be asked of you completely honestly, and also to be willing to say that you don't want to talk about it. It's okay to really say, I've had it, I'm up to here with talking about it, and I need a break. Doesn't mean that you don't come back to it, but you absolutely have to be honest if you've reached a point where you can't talk anymore about it. This is a time where you have to answer all questions 100% honestly, and a willingness to say you don't want to talk about it right away. In other words, if you and your partner are talking about this and you're reached overload, you need to say, I'm done, I can't talk anymore. They may be very upset and angry with you, saying that you don't care, but the reality is you need to set some limits for yourself too, or that's not going to help, and you're going to respond to your partner in an inappropriate way that's going to backfire on you. You have to show your spouse empathy, though, no matter what's happening. You have to keep talking and listening, no matter how long it takes to get through it, no matter how long it is and how painful it is. And this is really the key here. You must take responsibility for your action. Don't expect an easy forgiveness here. You made a bad choice. The choice you made is going to be one that's going to make your relationship worse than it's ever been. And there is no going back on it. So you have to then acknowledge that you blew it and that forgiveness is something you're hoping that they will be able to get to, but you understand that it may take a very long time, if ever at all. Okay? This is the most difficult part of the repair. And the only way to really do this is if you're doing it together. And what there needs to be is complete transparency. There are going to be questions that's going to come up days, weeks, months, even years down the road. And you have to be willing to talk about it and not get to a place where you say, I'm done, I'm not going to talk anymore about it. This is only going to lead to more anger, frustration, and resentment. This stage of forgiveness, the key here is to have an apology. Now, apologies can be quick, I'm sorry, but that's not going to do you any good. This has to be a sincere apology where you take responsibility for what you've done, talk about where you're at, and you need to really acknowledge the impact on your partner. Now, apologies can't be quick because then they're not real. But they also can't wait too long. Because if you wait too long, there's going to be a rage that settles in and takes over this relationship. And if you do that, it's possible that you won't be able to undo this, and there's no going back, and this relationship would likely end. Only one kind of apology really works here. And I have a model that I'm going to teach, and I'm also going to put it on my show notes, and I'm also going to put a link where you can get the show notes sent to you. And the apology, I'm going to do a PDF on doing an apology. I'm probably also going to do a PDF on courting and how to do the proper kind of courting that we talked about earlier. And you'll be able to just put your email in and get that sent to you. So there are some clear steps that are required to do an apology. And there are different roles, so I want you to really pay attention here, and you have to do it in this order. I want to add one thing to this, though. When we do the apology and begin to have this dialogue, that doesn't mean that the partner that had the affair isn't able to talk about some of the events and some of the things in the marriage that have been disturbing and not meeting your need. That dialogue, that assessment of the marriage, of all the things from both of your standpoints that need to change, have to be talked about in a very straightforward, direct way, and together make a commitment that you're going to work on those. So, as I was saying earlier, there's only one kind of apology that works, and that would be a very sincere apology, an apology that essentially this apology has a step-by-step method. The first step is the person that was betrayed, the woman in this case, or the man who did not have the affair. The betrayed spouse discloses to the partner the pain and anguish and the consequences that have occurred for her or for him due to the infidelity. This pain needs to be very specific, and it needs to have a deep description of the pain. The partner needs to tune in and accept the hurt and how the action evolved to put him there. So basically, the first person is saying, this is how it pained me and the consequences and the impact in a very deep way. The partner then talks about what led up to his having the affair and what was some of the nature of the relationship issues that prompted him to then seek out someone else. The third step of this is the betrayed partner then talks about the wound and the core of the hurt, not blaming the partner or defining the other person in any angrily way, but basically talks about how deep the pain is. And in this talk about the core of the hurt, talk about some of the long-term impacts on the relationship and on how she sees relationships and how she sees her world around her. The next step is the most important one. And this is when the partner who had the affair will then apologize and needs to express some real regret and remorse, sadness, and more importantly, and hopefully gotten to this place either in the counseling or together working on the relationship, some of the shame that comes along with the fact of his hurting someone that he cares so much about. What he needs to be able to say to the partner is that your pain hurts me, that the pain is a deep pain, and the pain is based on the fact that I did something that has caused you such distress and pain. The person that is wounded, or the other partner, the one that did not have the affair, can now ask for some comfort. Should talk about the fact about the missing connection and how without that the two of them have been in a really bad place, and that she really needs him or her back in her life in such a real deep emotional way, and that the connection was definitely missed and she is ready to forgive him. What the partner needs to be able to do who had the affair right here is to let her know that he or she is right there with him and cares. I am here now. I betrayed you. I did something that was inappropriate, and I promise not to do it again. But I am here with you, with your pain. I'm willing to sit with you. I love you. I care about you. I want us to be back where we are connected in a deep emotional way. The last step of all of this is together, both people need to create a new story of healing, a new view on the relationship, and a new future together where the two of you, as one entity, as a team, is going to work about making sure that this relationship stays secure and nothing like this ever happens again. So what the real message here, and this is the message that makes it a different apology than most apologies, is that your hurt is legitimate. There's no defensiveness with it. Your hurt is understandable. I caused you pain. I did something that created a situation in our relationship that is unforgivable, but I'm asking forgiveness anyway. Your hurt impacts me, and I care about it. That I feel sorrow, regret, and shame that I hurt you, the one person in my life that I care about the most. I caused you pain, and I'm here now. That message of being here now, the message of really being there for one another, there for each other, acknowledging the pain and acknowledging the loss of the connection is a critical piece of a true apology. From there, you need to continue to work on courting each other and being there for one another. The "I am here now for you" is an essential message. So what we're really talking about is in the steps of recovery of an affair. One of the first things and messages I want to sort of talk about to the person that might have had the affair is you absolutely, figuratively have to fall on your sword. You have to acknowledge what you've done. Without that acknowledging, you don't go anywhere. So you need to acknowledge it. You need to have a true apology, and this apology is not a one-time thing. You need to go through these steps many times, and it needs to be done with sincerity. You need to answer all questions honestly. You have to be an open book. You have to have broken off all contact with the person that you had the relationship with. And you have to really be amenable to talking about that you are experiencing a very deep loss with the relationship that you had with your partner. And as a side note, as we talked about, there needs to be some sense of a loss for the relationship. Your partner, your wife, your husband knows that you had an intimate relationship and that there's going to be some loss with this. Some of the things to keep in mind, however, is that you need to give yourself and your partner time to recover. You need a lot of support, and you should be talking to friends and talking about the difficulty that you're having. The two of you do need to talk about one with the discovery of the affair. It will be a very strong urge to walk out the door and tell them that you're finished. But please don't do that. You want to stay there. And what you want to do is to evaluate brutally the relationship. This relationship needs to be taken a look at very closely and seen whether or not it's worth salvaging. You want to process your grief and your anger and the distrust, and hopefully you can get yourself to a place where you can once again choose to love. This matter is a very private situation, and I would not recommend telling a lot of other people about it. You do need some support, and you need to be with someone that cares about you, that you care about, to try as hard as you can to really put your life back together. Act as normal as you can with one another. Look for reasons to stay, and for the person that had the affair, help your partner find a reason to stay. You want to seek help after the affair. I really do believe that couples counseling is a requirement when you have this issue that's come up. And if not, really need both of you to be at a place where you really can talk about things. Try not to blame each other. Take a look at the relationship and see what you can do, confronting the problems that you may not have been aware of previously. I want to sort of end with, I'm going to be putting a lot of resources on the website with the show notes for this, because there is nothing more difficult than this issue. I want you to accept that it's going to take an incredibly long time to recover from this, but also the belief and the knowledge. And I can tell you just from my own experience as a counselor that's been doing this for 25 years or more, this issue is resolvable. It's recoverable. And I have seen multiple relationships that have gone through this crisis and have turned around and later said to me, without saying that this was a good thing that happened to them, that this crisis allowed them to really take a look at their relationship, and they've walked away with a better relationship. They're more connected and more in love than they've ever been before. If I can be of any service, please feel to get hold of me. My website is www.thecouplesexpertscottsdale.com. My last message is to really nurture your relationship. There is nothing more important than having a relationship in which you feel loved, cared for, respected, and knowing that your best friend is by your side for your entire life. Take care. Have a good night. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to today's episode with your host, Stuart Fensterheim. You're one step closer to reigniting that fiery passion with your partner. For more information and your 30-minute free phone consultation with Stuart, visit www.thecouplesexpertscottsdale.com. We'll see you next time.